Hello, this is Julia from the Madison Public Library, and I'm introducing Brian, who's going to talk about today the science of fiction. So here he is.
Okay, so let's see. Get into my mindset. Hello, thank you for coming again. I thought I would talk a bit about some of the ideas that we see in science fiction and how they relate to actual science. So there's a lot of common things in science fiction. Probably the most famous is some way to go faster than light, whether just traveling faster than light or hyperspace, or in Star Trek there's warp drive. And basically the challenge is that everything is so far away. If it's a light years away, we can't get there in our lifetime, much less in multiple lifetimes. So a lot of science fiction writers use something to basically just shorten the gap, either to make it very quick or at least kind of ocean voyage scale, so that they can basically do space sea captain instead of doing boring science fiction stuff where nobody leaves the solar system. So of those, the biggest one is just simply traveling faster than light isn't possible. Within relativity, you can't travel faster than light. There's nothing in any research that would show there's a way to travel faster than light just simply by having bigger rockets. And the biggest problem is that basically in relativity, the more speed you get, the more resistant you are to speeding up still. Some people like to say that as you approach the speed of light, your mass gets bigger, but it's really about your acceleration gets smaller. So basically, if it takes 100 units of energy to get to half the speed of light, it's going to take 300 to get to 3/4 of the speed of light. It's going to take 1,000 to get to 80% of the speed of light, and you can never get there. So simply just having some type of fancy rocket and going faster than light isn't going to happen. Probably the other ideas, one of them would be warp drive is probably the most famous one because it's used in Star Trek. And that one's kind of interesting because the idea is that somehow, and Star Trek never really goes into it other than it requires warp coils, space around the Enterprise is warped in some way that it can go from one star system to another in a matter of hours or weeks. That's how it happens. And the reason is because you want to go see other star systems. So instead of visiting China, you can visit the Romulans, and then you do all sorts of things. Well, the interesting thing about that is that there is actually a paper, a published research paper. There's actually several, but there's one original one on warp drive. Because in relativity, gravity is not a force, it's a warping of space. The basic idea in general relativity is that if you have some mass like the Earth, it bends space around it. And that means that things fall. Instead of going into a straight line, they curve towards the Earth, and it looks like gravity. It looks like this force is pulling it. That's actually been tested. We know that space is warped around masses. They're warped around black holes. And time can also be warped in weird ways. So this paper looked at, let's just say, is there a way that space could be warped in order to create a way to travel from one star system to another, or to create a way to basically you bend space around you so that you can travel faster than light. You're not traveling faster than light through space, you're warping space so that your distance isn't the same. So that idea in general relativity actually works. It's a 4-page paper, and it basically just proves that yes, you can warp space to create warp drive. Of course, all the science fiction people get really excited about this. The catch is that the paper only looks at relativity, and relativity is only worried about if you have such and such mass, how does space warp? So if you can make up whatever mass you want, you can warp space in any way that you want. So what the author of the paper did was say, can I warp space this way and just put some type of mass thing there and create a warp drive? The answer is yes. If you look at the mass that he has to have, though, it can't be regular matter. So basically, he would need some regular matter, and he would need something that instead of attracting, would need to push. So you need some type of exotic matter with negative mass. Now, as far as we know, there is no such matter. Everything has positive mass. It attracts everything. But if you could make negative mass, then sure, you can have a warp drive. So the problem isn't with relativity. The problem is with how would you possibly make negative matter or negative mass? And the answer is just simply, we don't know. And as far as we know, it's impossible. So while relativity is fine with it, the rest of physics isn't fine with it. So unless we can figure out that, then we're not going to have warp drive. So I think another one to go between one star system to another, it isn't used as much, it was used in Stargate, is this idea of some type of wormhole. And this dates back in fiction to the idea of magic doors that take you across the world or to another place or anything like that. You know, there's lots of stories of magic doors. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe has a wardrobe that opens into another world. You know, so this idea of the secret door, the magic door, is very common. In science fiction, the idea is that for some way, whatever way that happens to be, you have usually some alien device that when you turn it on, you can walk through from one planet to another. And it's the Stargate is the classic idea of that. You turn it on, Stargate opens, and then you walk to another planet. So in physics, this is related to what's known as a wormhole, or more formally, an Einstein-Rosen bridge, because Albert Einstein and other people actually worked on this idea. And again, like the warp drive, relativity is perfectly fine with creating a wormhole. If you could somehow bend space and basically make a connection from one point to another, then sure, relativity is perfectly fine with that. The problem, again, is that you would need some type of exotic negative energy mass thing to do this. So again, how would you do it? There is, however, some interesting things with quantum theory and wormholes. And one of the things that we have as a problem in physics right now is that general relativity works really well. It works to describe black holes and planets and galaxies and the structure of the cosmos. It's very well tested. We know that it works. Then we have, on the other side, quantum mechanics, how atoms and molecules interact, and particle physics and all of that. And that works really well. The problem is they start with two different assumptions. What we would say is that relativity is a classical theory. It assumes that everything has an absolute position, that we can, you know, calculate its motion. We know exactly where something's going. Quantum mechanics doesn't. Things are these indefinite wave functions. They're smudgy and blurry until we can collapse them into a specific state. So we haven't figured out how to take quantum theory and general relativity and put it together. That would be something often called quantum gravity. So the idea would be you have some theory that describes both quantum mechanics when things are very light and very small, and general relativity when things are very large and massive, like black holes and planets. We don't know what that theory is, but there are some theories that try and put them together that argue that in order for this to work, space has to be foamy. It has to be quantum-y. So if you could zoom into space at tiny, tiny, tiny little scales, instead of seeing this kind of grid of where everything is, what you would get is this foamy, bubbly mass that's sometimes called quantum foam. Well, according to this theory, you would get not only this foamy, bubbly stuff, but you would get wormholes that would appear, disappear, and all this weird stuff. And if you could take one of those quantum wormholes and make it really big, maybe you can make it big enough to walk through. We don't know if that's what space is actually like. We don't know if we could do that, but it's one of those interesting things that dances on the edge of what might be possible rather than being proven. Okay, so those are fun ones. See, another one that's really common would be teleporting somewhere. The Star Trek transporter. That's a one that we would all just love to be able to just take a transporter and go to the Alps for a while, and then well, it's a hot day. I just want to go to Sweden or somewhere where it's cooler, so I don't have to worry about it. It'd be nice not to have to take a plane and hours in a car or anything like that. So in Star Trek, the transporter was actually just devised as a way. Gene Roddenberry just wanted some way to move the plot forward. And the problem with a spaceship is you either have to land the spaceship or you have to take a shuttle down to the planet, and that takes time. And in a 50-minute TV show, it's not something you want to deal with. So let's just have the transporter, and you can go from one scene to another scene immediately. No shuttle, no anything. All you have to do is some magic Christmas lights or whatever. So it was really just used as a plot device. But the interesting thing is that there is a way to teleport things in quantum mechanics. There is a thing called quantum teleportation. And while it sounds like science fiction, it is actually really important in things like encryption and quantum computing. So if you know the idea of the transporter, the standard idea of the transporter is that you're in a place and you use your little communicator and say, beam me up, Scotty, and then they move this little device on the Enterprise, and you all go wibbly wobbly and disappear on the planet, and then up on the Enterprise you go wibbly wobbly and reappear. And the basic idea is that you've somehow just been disassembled into your little atomic parts and put back together on the spaceship. So that's a great idea. But in quantum mechanics, even though teleportation works, it doesn't quite work the way Star Trek says it does. So when we talk about what an object is in quantum mechanics, it's not just how many atoms are there, what kind of atoms, where are they. It is actually something we call a quantum state. So it is the quantum information of everything that is in the atom or molecule or whatever. So if you think about it as a person, it would be not only all of your molecules, but exactly how you're holding your hand, down to the most minuscule level, exactly how you are breathing, exactly how your heart is beating. Every single fiber of you has to be absolutely known in this exact current state. And all of that down to the subatomic level is the quantum state. So if you know the quantum state of something, you know absolutely everything there is to know about it. Basically, everything we can know about it is everything there is to be known about it. So that is the quantum state of something. So basically what you can do in teleportation, in quantum teleportation, is you have a system, an atom or a structure of light in a laser or something like that. And there is a way in which things are connected in quantum mechanics called entanglement. Basically, every interaction that quantum systems have connects them in some way. Now, usually that just blurs out and you can never recover it. But if you connect them in just the right way, you can basically have two things separated at some distance. And they still have this connection. It hasn't dissolved away, and it's called entanglement. So you have these two entangled systems. And the thing about quantum mechanics is that if you measure one system, that entanglement lets you know about the other system, that they connect to each other. So what you can do is you can take an atom or something like that and entangle it with another atom. And if you know the quantum state of this system on one side, you can make a measurement, and what happens is the quantum state flips. So basically, this is in some quantum state that you know, and this over here is random. And then you do this measurement, and it goes pop. Now it's over here, but this is now random. So the reason this is powerful in things like encryption, suppose you want to send a message that you want no one else to know. Well, you store your message in some quantum state, and then your friend over here has another system, and then you make the measurement. Pop! Now they have the information. And the thing is, it only works if you're the only two that are interacting. If somebody tries to listen in the middle, the whole system just collapses, and then it doesn't work. So the information can only be sent if you're the only two listening. So it is literally at a physical level impossible for anyone else to know your message. So this idea, although it sounds like science fiction, is really important if suppose we have quantum computers that can now guess your passwords because they're vastly more powerful than anything we have now. Now it takes a lot of power to guess a good password. But if you had a quantum computer, you could guess a password like that. Boom, there it is. So passwords would become useless in some sense. So how would you keep anything secret? Well, what you would do is you would just do a quantum teleportation. Your information would go from one state to another. And you would know if anyone tried to listen in, what they get is gibberish. And your friend would go, I didn't get anything. So if it receives properly, you know they got it. You know no one else listened. So that idea works, and it's called quantum teleportation. And you literally are taking the state of one system and going pop, and it states over here. So in principle, if you had enough information, if you could entangle between two positions, you could be in one spot, you could do this measurement and go pop, and there'd be you over here. It's not quite that simple though, because in order to have the teleportation to work on a human scale, what you would have is you'd have to have you on one end, and you'd have to be entangled with some physical thing that is really close to you. It has to have the same type of atoms. It has to look like you. It has to be your size and everything, but it's not you. And so it would be very close to you, but not you. And then you would entangle it and go pop, and you'd be over here. But now where you were would just be something that kind of looks like you and isn't you. And what would you do with that? So it would be this weird thing. I mean, it's interesting that if you teleport, you cannot make a copy. You can't clone yourself. So one of the things in Star Trek is, I don't know, some officer gets teleported up to the ship in the middle of some magnetic storm, and they get him on the Enterprise, but there's also, it failed on the other side, so there's still an original on the planet. I think there was a Next Generation episode about Commander Riker, and one Riker got left on the planet for 4 years, and the other Riker made it back to the Enterprise. you know? So now there's two Rikers. So in Star Trek, you can make copies, which always kind of bugged me because I thought, you know, somebody dies, then just make their copy and, you know, you got them back. But, you know, that's a plot hole for me. But in actual quantum teleportation, you can't. The only way you can teleport to a new position is to destroy the original. The act of teleportation destroys the original. There can always only be one. And so you can't make copies. And also, you'd better hope that it works, because if it doesn't work, neither of them are you, and you die. So it's not foolproof, and you only have one chance to make it work. Of course, obviously, the problem is that while we can do quantum teleportation, we're talking about a small number of atoms. I think the last time I checked, they were up to 8 atoms, you know, and we have 10 to the 23rd atoms in our body. We're nowhere near enough to do any living thing. We can't even do viruses or anything. So we're talking about, you know, a few atoms that we can do that to. But that's an interesting one because in principle, there's nothing in physics that says that you can't, as far as we know. It's what we in physics like to say, well, that's an engineering problem. Because it's not a physics problem. It's like, well, just make a teleporting device and make a quantum computer that can be the size of people, and there you go. It's just an engineering problem. Let the engineers deal with it at this point. So that's an interesting one. Let's see, what are some other ones? There's well, related to teleportation, one of the things that is often used is if you can have warp drive, or if you can have faster than light travel, you have to be able to talk to your other spaceships or talk to other planets. And so that means you have to have some way to communicate faster than light. In Star Trek, it's usually a subspace channel. You know, you just have that. Most science fiction just ignores the fact that radio messages travel at the speed of light, and so it would take years and years for the message to reach there. They just make it. The technical term is an ansible, and it was based out of early science fiction and then popularized in Ender's Game. An ansible is basically a radio system that can communicate instantaneously across light years. And so it's just a science fiction term for that. Again, it's just a way to continue the plot. But one of the things that people have looked at is if you can do teleportation, could you, since the teleportation just happens in an instant, could you do that across light years? Could you teleport across light years and therefore travel messages faster than light? You know, basically write a letter, teleport it, and there it is. While it's an interesting idea, it doesn't work, because while the quantum teleportation allows the quantum state to travel, as far as we know, instantly, you have to know what you're expecting. In other words, if you're at one point, you have to know what the atomic system is at that point in order to be able to make it on the other side. You also have to know what are you going to measure, how, because the type of measurement allows that quantum state to happen. So you have to talk to each other to say, okay, we're going to do this teleportation, and we're going to make the measurement in this way, and I'm going to do it now. Pop. So you have to communicate back and forth in order for that to work. And that has to happen at regular light speed. So what you could do is you could say, okay, we're going to have this letter here, and we're going to send a spaceship at this, you know, under the speed of light to another star system, and then I'm going to make another system on the other side, and then we'll do the snap, and send the message. But at that point, the spaceship's already traveled there at less than the speed of light. You might as well just carry the message and say, look, tell them when you get there. It doesn't let you communicate faster than light. So while it's great for an encrypted message, it doesn't let you beat the light speed. Even quantum mechanics doesn't allow you to send information faster than light. And that's one of those things about quantum theory, is that a lot of people will say, relativity says nothing can move faster than the speed of light. Well, teleportation happens faster than the speed of light, but you can't carry information faster than the speed of light. You have to coordinate slower than light to know that you're getting information. So there's that whole problem. So in relativity, we would say no information can travel faster than the speed of light. So therefore things like light and atoms and spaceships all carry information about them. They can't travel faster than light. So there's, all sorts of things like that. I think in the other kind of common tropes is the idea of alien life. That would probably be the other big one. We travel to other star systems and we see all these aliens, and they're usually called like latex aliens, because they look basically like us, except they have a little bit of latex on their nose or on their ears or something like that. They look very, very close to being human. And that is, usually a budget issue. So is there life on other planets? And the answer is that we still don't know, because we don't know what it takes to get alien civilization. And one of the big problems, there's something called the Drake equation, which is basically, if life is fairly common, why aren't they communicating with us? And if you delve down into this idea, it could be that life is extremely rare, that only Earth and maybe the very most rare of planets would have life on it. If that's the case, then we could be the only living planet in the galaxy, at which point there wouldn't be anything else to communicate with. Some other ideas have that we're in a zoo, like the cosmic zoo, that basically, there's civilized aliens elsewhere in the universe, and they look at Earth and they say, those little monkeys need to shape up a bit before we can actually let them join us. So they're cute, but we're not going to tell them about us yet. We'll keep them in the zoo until they can develop something. It's touched on a little bit in Star Trek. Basically, the Vulcans and other races don't communicate with humans until they develop warp drive. And once they develop warp drive, and they say, "Oh, hi, we're here. We're all here, so you can join the civilization." So that's one idea. But another one that's kind of a little haunting is that it could be that when you get to being an intelligent species, you end up destroying yourself. So this is something that Carl Sagan speculated about. If you look at, the way we have transformed our planet and face things like global warming and pollution, it takes a lot of energy and population to become a spacefaring species, to be able to build a technological civilization. Well, maybe that depletes a planet, And so you can ask yourself, if we look at humanity, how long do you think humanity has been around? In terms of civilization, we've probably been around about 12,000 years. If you look at the kind of earliest stone features that have been made as a culture, rather than just stone paintings, which goes back, 35, 40,000 years. But about 12,000 years of what we would call a civilized culture. So if we've lasted 12,000 years, do you think we'll last 100,000? Do you think we'll last 1 million or 10 million? You start thinking about that numbers, you start going, I don't know that we're going to last 1 million, maybe not, Another 10,000 people are pretty optimistic, but another, although on some days it's another 2 years, and we don't think we're going to make it past that. But if you think, what if we last 100,000 years? That would be considered a pretty good run. And yet, in the time of the cosmos, that's a very short moment of time. The age of stars is on billions of years. So 100,000 years is just a couple of minutes. So it could be that as we go out and look for other civilizations, there are lots of civilizations throughout the galaxy. But the galaxy is 100,000 light years across. So if, let's say, civilizations last 10,000 years, if we get a signal from an alien species that is 20,000 light years away, we'll get their signal, but they died 10,000 years ago. So we can see, okay, there's a message from a ghost. There's other civilizations. So there may be civilizations that pop up in the galaxy all the time, but not at the same time. Because on the cosmic scale, 100,000 years, one way or the other, is nothing. Dinosaurs were starting to get intelligent. What if they came up? That was 65 million years ago. If they could have developed to a intelligent species, they would be tens of millions of years ahead of us. And if they only last 10,000 years, they would have wiped themselves out long before we were around. So on other planets, any of those life forms, we may send signals back and forth through the depths of space, but all we're hearing are the messages of dead aliens, because we may not live long enough. Nobody says that we have to all reach civilization at the same time. We could reach it at very different times, and we may, while having a universe full of life, we may always be the only one because we're the only one that's awake and around at that time. And then we'll fade. Some other civilization could open up. So it could be both very populated and very lonely. There's a quote about aliens that I really like, which is, either we're alone in the universe or we're not. And either answer is profound. So on that, I'll leave you with that. And if we're doing this again, I'll come up with some other idea. But if not, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm sure you'll see me around. Any questions? My schooling wife would say. Nope. Okay. Well, I will talk to you later then. I hope you have a good day. Okay. Bye.